this video, I want to demonstrate how to create a form that has a list box in it with a list of queries in it. And from that query list that's in that list box, I want to be able to double click on a button that will open the query that's specified in the list box. So, of course, first I'm going to talk about a list box and how to add a list box. Then I'm going to show you how to create the row source for that query list to give you the list of queries in that list box. And then finally, I'm going to show you how to create a button on the form that will open the specified query that is selected in the list box. Okay, so to do these particular actions, I'm going to switch over to my database here, and I have a form that's already created called Form Queries, and I am currently in design view of that form, and I'm going to click here to design because I'm going to select a list box to add to my form. So I'm going to click here on design, and then I'm going to come down here to the more button, and here you can see that I'm pointing at the list box control, and I will click on it, and then I will come here and click, and now I have an unbound list box. And remember, the function of this list box is to list all of my queries that I have in my database. So I'm going to indicate that in my label. I'm going to say query list and give it a colon. Okay. And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, just because, you know, query names can be fairly long, and we could have a number of different queries. And then over here for my list box, so you can see in the property sheet for list box, that's what I'm showing right here are properties for this list box. And here you can look at name, and I can select the name, and I'm going to change that name so that it's LST query list. Now, once again, this right here, this guy right here, is an L, not a 1. And that's important for later. So I'll press enter, and now I've named this particular list box LST query list. So now, if I go back to my agenda, I've created a list box, and now I'm going to give the list box a row source property of the query list, or the list of queries in my database. So I'll go back to my database, and I'll come over here to data, and here is where it says row source. So I'm going to click in there, and then I'm going to click on build button. And the table that I want is MSys objects. And so I'll say add, and I'll say close. Okay. And so the name of the query is what I want. So I'm going to say name. okay? And MSys objects actually lists all of the object names along with other information. So I'm going to help filter out those extra names and extra information by the type field. So I'll bring down the type field, and all queries have a type of 5. So I'll enter 5. Now if I run this as it is, you can see that there are some query names here, but there's also ones that are not names of queries in my list. So I'll go back to query design here, and I'm going to get rid of any of the other records that aren't names of queries, and those other records happen to start with a tilde. Let me just show you that again. See here, here's a tilde, here's a tilde, here's a tilde. So I want to get rid of those records, and the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to come here and I'm going to use the left function. The left function can take information or a set of string characters that are either in a field or just in quotes, and then can pick out a number of those characters. And so you'll see what I mean in a moment. So I'm going to say left, and then I'm going to say parentheses. Now that indicates I'm going to give you the information that I need, meaning give the left function the information that I need. So then I'll say left bracket name, because that's the field that has the extra information in it. And then I'll say comma, and then I'll say 1. So that means I'm 1, the first character in the name field is what I want to look at. And I'll say parentheses and enter. And if I run that, now I can see, oh, here is just the first character of that name field. So I'll go ahead and click on design again, and I actually don't want that to appear in my row source, so I'm going to unclick it, and I'm also going to say I don't want anything in that field that starts with a tilde, right? So I'm going to say not equals, quote, tilde, end quote, and press enter. And so now if I run it again, I will see that only the names of the queries and then the type 5. And I actually don't want the name of the type or the type to show either, so I'm going to unclick the show button. And so I've created my list of queries here, and so I'll go ahead and click on design view, and I'll close, and it asks me if I want to save it and update my row source, and I want to, so I'll say yes. And so now if you look here, it is actually put in the SQL statement. So what I did was I created that query in a pictorial fashion, and now it's showing you in a Word style fashion, like for example in a SQL format. That's what it's really showing you. Okay, so if I were to go back here and go into form view, you could see now that it will in fact show the list of queries in this particular database. So let's just check in with our agenda. We did a list box. We set the row source query for the list box, and it was an SQL statement that showed up as the property, even though we created it in a more pictorial format. And now our next item on our agenda is creating a button to open a selected query. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a button here that is going to run a macro that we will associate with the button, and that macro will open a query, and the query that it will open will be based on what is listed here and selected in my query list box. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click my button control, and I'll come here and I will click, and so now I have a button that says Command 5, but that's not very helpful. So I'm going to change what it says, and I'm going to say Show Query. And I think I really don't like how everything here is showing in kind of a gray lettering. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to click here on Home. I'm going to change the lettering to black so it can show a little bit better. And maybe I'll make my button a little bit bigger. There, it centers it nicely. All right, so I'm going to click on my button, and so now I'm referring to that button, and I'll come over here to the properties sheet and I will click on Event, and here are a list of events. Well, the event that I want to use is OnClick, because I want it so that when the user clicks on the button Show Query, it will do the action of opening the query that is selected in the list box. So I'm going to come over here to the build box, and I'm going to I would click on Macro Builder if it wasn't already selected, and I click on OK. Then I'll say Open Query, because that's what I want to do, is I want to open a query. Now the next part is a little bit tricky, okay? Because usually what you would do is you would just indicate which query in this list you want. But the problem here is just that we don't really want a specific query. We want the query that is specified in the list box, okay? So I'm going to say, instead of listing a specific query, I'm going to say equals, and that means go and find something somewhere. That's what it's saying here. Equals, so I'm going to go and find a control somewhere that has some information in it. And so the place where I want to go is to the list box, and the name of the list box is LST Query List. Remember, that's the name that we gave this particular list box, okay? And so then I can press Tab, and it'll put the brackets in there for me, the left square bracket and the right square bracket. Okay, and then I'm going to say Save, and I'm going to close. Now I'm just going to go back over this one more time just so that you understand. This right here is a list box, and if I come up here and click on the All tab, and I come to the top, it says Name, and it says LST Query List. That's the name of the list box. And so the user can click on an item in that list box as saying that's the one that they want. And this particular button, I can go and look at the event here, and you can see that we have typed in the open query command, and then we're saying here with this equal sign, go somewhere else to find the information that I want. And the information is in the control LST query list. And so then I will save it, and I will close. And now we'll go into form view. And here's our form, okay? And so I'm just going to pick a query right here, and I'll say show query. And there I have a query, the query patients by name that I picked in my list box has come up here and listed, shown up, okay? So let's check back in with our agenda, okay? We made a list box, and then we set the row source property for the list box, and that particular query or that particular row source had a list of queries that are in the database. And then we worked on creating a button that had an associated macro, and that macro opened the selected query in the list box. So hopefully that worked for you and you understood that. And thank you very much for watching this video.